Welcome to Spore Journeys. I'm Milan, and today we're joined by Chris Dowdeswell, founder of Mycopunks. Chris went from tech burnout to psychedelic awakening to building one of the UK's most trusted mycology companies. We'll explore how mushrooms helped him redefine success and build community and create tools that empower thousands of growers. Let's dive in.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. So, Chris, you've spoken about selling your company and having money for the first time, yet feeling emptier than before. Can you take us into that moment and why didn't success deliver what you'd hoped?
So I used to run a business called Vine Up which I started back in 2012. I worked pretty much solidly for 6 years in the exact sort of startup culture that everyone in the tech industry knows. Just long hours working, sort of late into the evening, doing overnighters constantly just to deliver the product. Um, we so basically I worked solidly on that for 6 years, and we sold the business in 2018. And up until that point, I was pretty sort of I was financially struggling myself, so I was kind of working all these hours, really trying to make this business work. We had lots of good customers, and yeah, when we got to sort of selling the business, it was a it was a kind of a bit of a weird moment for me. I think pretty much the week before, I'd had a conversation with my bank where they were due to remove my overdraft facility. So I was that in that level of sort of like financial difficulties, and I went from that to having a good amount of money for the first time in my life, but also being out of the tech industry for the first time with options on what might come next. And it was a weird situation because I think previous to that, I'd always painted the idea of financial success being one of the sort of biggest relievers of pressure in your life. And what I actually found was, while I had money, not having any purpose was like having a void in your life. And it was actually really anxiety inducing all the time. Even though I didn't have the other anxieties of being able to pay bills, it was a whole new type of anxiety where I dedicated my life from the age of 15 to being a programmer. So more than half my life I'd been in this role, and I didn't really know anything else or any type of industry. So yeah, I was 2018. I'm out of employment, but I have money for the first time, and I start to think what comes next. Really, when you're in that position, and like so many people, I had a dabble back into magic mushrooms with a friend after. I think the last time I'd tried them, I must have been in my early 20s, and I had some pretty sort of incredible experiences that gave me new perspectives, I think is probably the easiest way of putting it. Um, I think we started off relatively slow at almost like a, recreational level of, let's kind of see the patterns type level, and worked up to relatively heavy doses of the therapeutic doses. And I think, for the first time, it completely gave me the opportunity to look at these new opportunities that I had in my life, and look where I wanted to sort of focus things, and reassess things that were important in my life. And being out in nature specifically, I think was a huge thing. Psychedelics in nature is very much a different experience. And before I'd sort of started getting back involved with magic mushrooms, um, I think I'd completely disconnected from nature. I was very much an A to B. My life, was very much a work lifestyle. And it gave me this kind of perspective on where I wanted to put my efforts. I think I wanted to work with nature in some way, but I also wanted something that provided some level of sort of technical pushback for me, where there was problems to solve, things that would actually, that would allow my brain to keep ticking over. So I started cultivating,
Mm.
and I had the idea that I was going to start a cultivation business. So I'd spent pretty much a year researching and practicing grows and kind of learning all about mushroom growing, and that sort of dragged on a little bit, and then we headed into lockdown, where I kind of was in the final stages of setting up my cultivation business, and obviously that's a bit of a rug pull when you're looking to deal with restaurants and people in an industry that's now pretty much closed down. And as we came out of that, as we started coming out of lockdown, I put more and more effort into the business to sort of get things set up. And the things that I learned along the way was, at that point in time, there were no real clear pieces of equipment or supplies that were field tested that I could just buy from a place. So it kind of converted it pivoted the business slightly into that I felt that there was a need for someone to have those supplies that other mushroom growers that could easily buy and know that they were the correct products. So that's kind of where Mycopunks was born. And we were originally going to be this a cultivation business, and the frustrations from from trying to set up that business, and having to build everything yourself, which is very much the mushroom grower's life. You do so much other than growing mushrooms as a mushroom grower. Um, that was the new path, was to create products and equipment that people could just buy and know was good. So yeah, that was Mycopunks. So sort of 2021, where we kind of properly launched. We had a small premises in the centre of Gloucester, and revenue sort of exploded month on month. It was a almost an initial, I say almost an overnight success. It was an overnight success, like years in the making. So it was, it was a kind of a crazy ride for the first year. We doubled revenue almost every month, and we ended up having to hire, and what was initially meant to be sort of like this little lifestyle business where hopefully I could take a wage was now we're actually turning into a proper business, whether we liked it or not, which is a good thing, because I'm absolutely in love with the mushroom industry, and I love talking to people about mushrooms, and now it's my job. So
Wow.
yeah, so that's Mycobugs. Yeah.
That's that's a super interesting story. So to kind of paraphrase it, once you did the successful exit, um, you found yourself without a life purpose of something to move toward, and then you happened across. I mean, did you approach um, psychedelics with that intention of like, oh, this could maybe help me find a direction, or it's just something that kind of from
No.
engaging emerged that it's like, oh wow, now I've got this kind of new thing I can be doing.
So this was around the time that Michael Pollan had just started talking about how sort of psychedelic can change your mind, and so this was very much an unintentional thing. This was what was intended to be a recreational thing. I think I quickly realized was was having a really profound effect on my life. And I think once you have a few experiences like that, you do start to sort of go down that rabbit hole of working out why, and what are the mechanisms behind it, and why does it have this effect on me. Um, so yeah, I definitely didn't go into it with any. I don't think I even went into it with any knowledge that mushrooms had a therapeutic effect. So it was kind of an exciting, revolutionary thing for me from the get go.
Hmm. So and having gone through that process and looking back at that, is there anything that you could think of that are there some elements of that that people can engage with if they don't want to go down that rabbit hole, or they're in the city somewhere and they don't have that kind of access? Maybe they're in a place where it's not so easy to get there. Are there some elements of your journey that you could share that helps people, to help people reconnect with their sense of purpose from what
Yeah.
you've gone through?
I think I think it's important to kind of I don't want to understate the importance of actually being out in nature as part of this journey. I think that the reconnecting with nature, I have, whether this would have happened without psychedelics or not, I think if I would have spent more time looking at things on a smaller level, and actually spending time being more interested in nature, I think that would have had a larger part to play with this. Um, obviously I've come at this from an angle of of a drug that very much makes you feel um, part of nature and more interested in the mechanics of nature. But I do think that now, where I'm at now, I very rarely sort of have psychedelic experiences now, mostly because I don't have the time to book it in as being an important part of an important part of my life quite often, and I probably do need to. But I think now the nature and the interest in ecology and biology has kind of taken over from where psychedelics took me. So I do think that that route doesn't require psychedelics as an input. And for people who live in inner city areas, almost everywhere has like green spaces that depending on what level you're willing to sort of get down in the dirt, there are always things to find. So and even in sort of like little patches of near a bus stop, you'll find interesting things. And I think when you get into mushrooms, it's very much, especially when you get interested in identifying mushrooms, you start to see them everywhere. It always, whenever I'm out walking with my parents, I'll spot something miles away, and I have like this. You get the vision, don't you, where you start to recognize patterns and things like that. So I think it gives you a more exciting lens to view the world through. And it also, for me personally, it slows down time for me. Whenever I'm out in the woods, I feel like it has this effect where I don't feel like life is slipping away from me too quickly. Whereas when I'm working, sometimes I'm like, you very much have that feeling of like, where has the month gone constantly? Why is it now the end of the month? I never get that when I'm out in nature. I never get that feeling of like of being rushed, which is great.
That's a really good point, actually. I think just that foraging and being interested in mushrooms in general, then when we go out looking, we're actually taking a much closer look, and we're being much more mindful the way that we engage with our environment, whether that's a local park or a forest nearby. It's just another way of looking where we actually look much more deeply at the earth and what's going on and what's going on with the plants. And yeah, I can see how that, I mean, from my own practice as well, foraging, I can definitely see how that helps to reconnect with who am I really and what do I really want, which
Yeah.
is increasingly important, I think. When it comes to mycopunks, I think it's super interesting how you essentially, if I captured that correctly, you've gone out to do something. You wanted to grow mushrooms, set up a mushroom farm, and then you found that actually doing this is not as easy as it should be. So then you solved the problem. You solved your own problem, and you did that in a way where you've created something that a lot of people have. Well, it's been very successful, right? So, um, what is it about? I guess it's a couple of questions really. When I check the trust pilot, because you're talking about being one of the most beloved mushroom suppliers or things like that, and it's like, well, that's quite the
According to me.
that's quite the claim. Damn. Well, I went to Trustpilot and it's been over 2,400 reviews at 4.9 rating. That's really incredible. I mean, that's really, really a very high standard. And so I guess my question is, um, what do you attribute the fast success of Mycopunks to? And connected to that, how do you create a culture of excellence, I guess you'd call it?
Oh, that is a good question. Um, so so really everything comes down to, I think everything comes down to the community that we've built around the company. One of the things that yeah, in the first year of running the business, I very much had like this unlimited energy for helping people on a granular level, an individual level. So I'd be up, all hours of the sort of of the night, messaging people back, helping them with the sort of individual grow issues. And I think that set the standard for me as to where I wanted Mycopunks to feel for people, where it's like, if you've got this problem, or you're having some problem that everyone else is having, you can at least share it and get some feedback. Um, I think the biggest thing that allowed us to scale the business to where we are and keep that level of feeling of just being supported is twofold. It's firstly, picking the right people for your individual team to make sure that people understand that if I have like exacting standards on a product, or if I have a quality level that I expect, um, that they understand that, and that they can take that forward, and that it goes from me to the customer, and all those steps in between are all, everyone understands where we're at. But really, I think the biggest thing for us is the community that we built around Mycopunks, the Discord community specifically. It's a place where our team and moderators, they will help people on that individual level still, to a level where I couldn't do that as an individual anymore. I think after the first year, it wasn't a sustainable thing for me to be kind of being able to be available to everyone anymore, and it is a definite recipe for burnout, whether you like it or not. So,
Yeah.
I think that fundamentally, like, being able to allow the community to support themselves is actually a brilliant, is a brilliant idea, and I think that would work across so many industries. And I know it's already a big thing in the tech industry, having community, sort of community developer forums, and actual allowing the community to support each other. And for a small business like us, it it allows us to some extent to like outsource our support, which, and I wouldn't want to do it to someone who doesn't care, to someone who doesn't care. So having the community do it themselves is kind of a beautiful thing. And our moderators as well, obviously they make sure that the advice is good that's been given out. So it's like yeah, that's an important thing too. But yeah, I think it's a really difficult thing to maintain standards when you're creating the sort of products. A lot of the products that we create, they have a built-in failure rate anyway, because we're creating sterile products effectively. We're not creating things using machinery, like heavy duty machinery that automates things. We're doing things by hand still, like I think everyone else in our industry pretty much is. Um, and there's a human aspect to it, so there is a contamination risk. And I think what we've tried to do from the beginning is say we'll give people a really good safety net, with regards to our product, knowing that we have like a small failure rate. If you have issues with our product, whether it's you or us, we'll always just replace it without
Mm.
sort of grilling people as to their techniques or anything like that. Because I think
Yeah.
it's off-putting. It can be a relatively expensive hobby in a cost of living crisis. If you're really interested in growing mushrooms, and you don't have the money for it, I think having that safety net's really important. Um, so yeah,
Mm.
I think that's where we're at.
Mm.
It's a good community that supports itself, and it's also a very odd community as well, which makes for an interesting, it makes for an interesting time at least. So
Okay, that's great. Yeah, that gives me a better understanding. So I get that you're fanatically dedicated to customer success, and you're building a community with the customers. And it seems like, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of supply stores that have that approach. So perhaps that's the secret ingredient that has allowed Mycopunks to rise so quickly.
yeah, I do think it's an important factor. Obviously um, I think having that safety net is probably one of the biggest things that is the differentiator. I think we know that customers are new to this. A lot of our
Mm.
customers are brand new to cultivation. And I don't think, with the products that we create, we have the sort of, we build in the margins where we can support a good proportion of people with replacements as like as an insurance against their any 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 sort of mess ups. And I do think that that's probably the thing that people feel most comfortable with when they're making a purchase with us.
Mm. Yeah, that's super interesting. So it's like there's this customer need, or a concern about, I'm going to get a bunch of equipment and spend a bunch of money, and then what if it doesn't work out, and then I'm left with, like, do I have to buy it again? I've spent all this money and it hasn't worked. So then you're there to say, okay, look, here's a replacement, or let's talk about, talk to someone who has experience in XYZ, and they can help you out in the community.
Yeah.
Um, I really like the idea of how you're hosting the community, thereby making what you do scalable. So, like as you said, you can't help thousands of people as just one of you, and there's only a handful of your staff. But if you set up the community correctly, then the people you're allowing the people to connect with each other, and that's very mycelium like as well. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it that way, where it's this decentralized thing of like you don't have to help everyone out; you just have to create a space where people can interconnect in a sense.
Definitely. Yeah.
And um, so when it comes to the grind, because I mean it's definitely also been a lot of hard work. I get that, and there's a lot of, like you said, physical labor involved. It's kind of like farming in some ways, I guess, creating these substrates, right?
The way we describe ourselves is we're a glorified garden center, which is that's the, I think when people, often when we put job adverts out, we need to temper people's expectations. There's a romanticism around working in the mycology industry, which sometimes I wonder if we are or not. We a lot of the products we create are they are we're a cross between almost like a chef and a and a garden center. So, but there's still, it is mycology, and it's all mycology, is what I like to say.
I read the staff profiles on the webpage, and it's pretty hilarious actually. It was pretty funny. Some of the ways that people that describe themselves, or the balaclava guy, and there's a lot of humor. So I guess that kind of helps create a sense of camaraderie when you just have these days of just having to grind through. Um, so that how did you is it the overall vision of what you're doing that actually helps you power through that grind? Because I'm just asking because a lot of the listeners that we have, or the people that we work with, are also needing to go through some kind of startup grind, or kind of get into the operations of doing their own thing, right? And how do you get through those difficult days, and just keep going and keep building?
I think that I've got this luxury of where, I find something that I really, really care about. And, that I think is what it boils down to for most people. When you look at burnout, the first year of running Mycopunks, the fact that I had so much energy, there's a word, eustress, which I read it a while back, which is the opposite of distress. And it's something you get from it's almost like an energizing force that you get when you really love doing something. It's the opposite of burnout. It just fills you up with energy constantly, to an almost a godly level. And I feel like I had that, with the first year of Mycopunks. I still now, there's not been a day when I haven't, looked forward to going into work. So whether that is something that will always continue, and it's not to say we don't have bad days. I think, we have days when mistakes are made. We have days when revenue is suffering, and we're kind of worried about cash flow. We have all the sort of normal worries of a business. Obviously we have 9 staff. So for me personally, it's like I'm always worried about being able to support people with their wages. So that's always what it boils down to for me. Um, but yeah, I think really it's about whittling down and actually being kind of unrelenting on finding the thing that you really care about, and solving a problem that's personal to you. Because if you're working in a job that where you feel like you're just solving other people's problems, or it has no personal connection to you, I think that burnout can creep in really easily. And it's not to say actually that some of the technical aspects of your job might be the thing that you love. I've met plenty of people who actually just running a business is the thing that they love. So it doesn't matter what the business is.
Hmm.
It's the startup culture. It's they'll take to anything, and they like the running of a business. And I think that would really help. A lot of people. I quite like running a business. I quite like, you know, the I like the day to day of it. That said, there are things that we struggle with all the time. We still struggle with with cash flow like every other business. We still struggle with like ordering cycles and all these sorts of things. So and because it's not an industry that that I'd worked in before or had any knowledge of, it was all very much like a trial by fire. And I think because we had a relatively decent amount of success in the first year, some of those cash flow issues just weren't apparent until like you start to get to a certain level where you're feeling like this is actually where the business is now. But yeah, I think that my advice really, and this is such a, in a way, it's kind of a shitty piece of advice, right? Because so many people, this is the thing where most people struggle the most, is to find something that they really care about and actually be able to have the luxury to be able to work in an industry that they really care about. And I think that if it wasn't for for the wider community and the wider, the types of people that I get to talk to, I don't think that this industry would be that anything special at all. But the mushroom industry is something, it's very separate to everything else, if that makes sense. It's, the people are interesting. We're working at sort of like the beginning of a wave of science as well, where people at home can actually run experiments and actually have results that are valid to a wider community. And the turnaround is quick as well, so you can, there's all sorts of cool upsides to being in the mushroom industry. So but yeah, it is easier said than done, definitely, to say just find the thing that you love. Yeah.
Then the question becomes, how do I do that? But I think you pointed in a good direction with some of the earlier questions that we discussed. When it comes to that, like reconnecting to your true self and those kinds of things, I do see that Mycopunks has some very strong values and a vision. There's a kind of vision that I don't see it, spelled out on the homepage, but there is definitely a vision about, um, you know, creating a better world or helping people. And you've got the 4-day work week, which is very unusual for a business to just say, "Yep, we're doing this," without waiting for the government to say, "No, everyone's got to do 4-hour work weeks." You just said you've taken that initiative, and that's very interesting. So, like, where does that come from? There's these initiatives and this community mindedness. What is the bigger vision of Mycopunks?
Um, so 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 my background, when I was in my younger years, I was involved in activism quite a lot. So I think that a lot of my values, as a person running a business now, is that I'm trying to imprint some of those core values into the day to day of running the business. I wanted it to be so sort of ingrained in the business that it doesn't feel like something that's like extra to it, or something that we do,
Mm.
in response to whether we have a good month or not. And I wanted it to be meaningful as well. So it's like, in terms of how we treat our staff, um, I wanted to run the business in a way that I would have wanted my boss to be when I was employed. Um, and the 4-day work week is an interesting one. I think, in my mind, as an employee, the only two things that really matter are your time and, your financial sort of compensation. So those are the two things that give you freedom in, like, freedom in your everyday life. Um, and I think to that end, I think 4-day work week, it actually solves a lot of business issues as well, which I think it's a weird pushback in the UK. I think a lot of traditional businesses don't see the value in it because they feel like that they can just squeeze as much as they can out of the employee to produce value. Not realizing, of course, that these are just these are people with lives. So, what I think we noticed in the first year was that, firstly, there was a drop off in, we don't get as many people off sick because people are just more well rested. They're ready to sort of focus when they're in work. Another interesting part of it was, when we took up the 4-day work, we basically said to everyone, we would really like to take a day off each week. We'd like to fit everything that we're doing right now into 4 days, without any loss of quality, without cutting corners. If we can make this work in a trial, then we would move to a 4-day work week. We won't change we're not going to reduce your wages or holiday. So you get exactly the same benefits and entitlement, but you just have to work less. So it was a good catalyst for people to look at the processes, in their different areas of the business. So, in the lab, people are looking where they can optimize. They're reassessing their workspace, and what we ended up with really is actually just a more refined version of the business where things are more streamlined. The business actually got better,
Mm.
and everyone else was more rested. People feel like, you know, having that extra day is just, it almost feels like this should be the norm, really. This is you know, as an employee previously, you get home on a Friday night, you're exhausted, you don't do anything Friday night. Saturday, you're doing your chores and all the stuff that you have to sort of, to live. And then you've got Sunday maybe, and it's just, it isn't enough for a human being to have, to have hobbies and aspirations outside of work. And my approach to this fundamentally has been that I don't I don't think human beings are designed to be working, like this. Um, I know people, need things that they need to do to sort of like, to make the wheel spin, and they need purpose. But yeah, I think this is really the fundamentally, this is how we should be working. But yeah, it's good. But the whole business, the business, everyone, the staff love it. I've been picking at other businesses in the local area and just mocking them until they do it. I've been behind the scenes back channeling to try and get staff to push their bosses to go to a 4-day work week. So it's like it's become like a mission statement for me now, where I think
Yeah.
all businesses should be doing this. But yeah, other than that, I think, the community supporting the community that supported us is another big thing. So, initially, I think we were looking at like, early days, we looked at stuff like carbon offsetting and these other sort of like environmental things that the business could do, and that are very much like boilerplate. Um, they're boilerplate things for businesses to plant trees or whatever. And I wanted to do something a bit more specific where we actually felt like we were supporting individual projects. So we support various mycology projects around the UK. Obviously, we support events and stuff like All Things Fungi Festival. We try and kind of support the community financially where we can, and I think whenever we see people working on interesting mycology projects where they need materials, we're always just like, we'll support that wherever we can. Um, and that way we can have these more focused, a more focused approach to like environmental protection, and actually have, I think just a more meaningful um, approach to this, rather than just saying, yeah, we pay X amount a month to plant a tree. Yeah, we try
Mm.
and be a bit more involved, I think is the phrase. So,
Yes. So it's a bit more discerning the way that you give support. You look at something worthwhile and then you apply support where you see that it's needed and where it's
yeah,
perhaps much more effective than just putting money into something it's a bit more abstract, perhaps.
yeah,
And yeah, as you say, boilerplate. So kudos to you for creating a business that's also very socially responsible or very humane in the sense of acknowledging, as you're going through someone's typical weekend, and I've certainly been there, acknowledging that a human has other things to do other than work. And I really appreciate you applying the golden rule there, right? Like, I want to be the employer that I wish I could have had, and that really resonated. And I just hope that more people can be inspired by that, and I hope that you're able to, I guess, model that to people and show them that, hey, this is possible. This is how I can run a business, and I'm not going to go out of business by taking care of people.
yeah,
And I think it's also important because the audience that we're building and the community that we're building, um, they're often people in a corporate situation, or they've just left that, and they're looking for more meaningful things to get involved with, but also they're looking for a better sense of life balance, right? And so I like the fact that Mycopunks is an example of, um, yes, it's still a business. Yes, we still need to make money, but let's do it in more of a humane way where people actually feel a sense of belonging and community, and they feel like their human needs outside of work are respected. So it does provide, it's not just leaving the corporate grind to jump into another grind.
Yeah, yeah.
It's actually qualitatively different. And I really, appreciate you doing it like that. And I trust that more people will acknowledge that and become customers or join the team. So
I hope so.
hopefully to to um to get to the All Things Fungi Festival, I had a few questions for that. So Mycopunks being a major sponsor, the major sponsor of All Things Fungi. How did that, first of all, how did that come about that you got involved there, and what is it about that festival that got you interested in getting involved in that way?
So our customers have been had been hassling us for quite some time to do a meetup. And knowing how odd they all are, I was I was to be honest, we were too busy. We were always too busy to ever arrange any sort of event at that point. We thought, at some point we might do something on a smaller scale. And I'd been chatting to Max for a while. Max from All Things Fungi Festival. I was a big fan of his photography, and so I'd been kind of chatting to him beforehand anyway. And he told me about the festival, and I was just like, "That's great. We can actually, this is something that is exactly what we stand for." And I think it fundamentally, it's everything about it is more mushroom focused at the festival rather than, I think, a lot of festivals, in the UK space, they're more how can mushrooms and entheogens, for instance, which is the kind of main focus, how can they help us? And I think the All Things Fungi is very much how I would like it to be, which is it flips that on its head, and what can we do to be supporting fungi and ecology. Um,
Mm.
so really, as an event, it's just perfect. I cannot say how much I love going to All Things Fungi Festival. It's I have a limited amount of energy for talking to people, like just in everyday life, and I do feel like I have this weird energy at the festival where I'm just like I can chat to everyone about mushrooms for ages, and it's just a different thing. It's like it yeah, it ticks so many boxes for me. It's a huge learning experience every time I go. I come away feeling like I've got 100 new ideas, for Mycopunks. I feel like I get to talk to a lot of our customers there, obviously, as well, which is cool. People know who you are, and they come up and go, "Oh, I got into growing because of one of your kits or whatever." So, yeah, all around, it's a really good, yeah, it's a great festival. I'm really happy to be able to support it. So,
Well, that's great. It sounds like an overlap of so many things that are really important. And getting out and mingling in person, it's certainly something that we always love to do. And I look forward to connecting with you in person when we're over there doing our little workshop,
yeah.
and where we get to get in amongst it and meet some of these mushroom people. And yeah, it is a nerdy, eccentric crowd in some ways, and people with really interesting backgrounds and stories. So I can't wait to be there. This time there is a new community space. What's your idea with that? So you've set up an area there, and that's allowing people to get hands on, or what's your main intention with that space?
Yeah, so one of the things that the festival prior to this year has been very much sort of people get out into the woods, they get to do sort of hands-on foraging and learn about mushroom identification. There's all sorts of talks and various activities, but there's not really been anything that gets any area that was specifically for actual mycology, some of the mycology concepts, like these different cultivation concepts, or looking at mycomaterials, things like that. So what I wanted to do was create an area that looked at the spectrum of opportunities within the sort of mycology space, whether it be, I mean, we've got my friend Smithy this year as well, who's going to be there doing his sort of reishi bonsai. So it's kind of a mix between art and science. but it's all going to be very practical, so people can turn up. They actually get to just get stuck into some of the methods that are used. And I think that really is like it's the one thing where you can sit and you'd be like, okay, I can see someone doing something, and I'm really interested. I'd love to know how to to prepare a slide for a microscope. Is something I've seen 100 other people do, but I've never had the opportunity to sit there and do it. I think that really is what this space is going to be about. Is people sit down, you just get to do the things, and I think that's a really good thing. It's I think what I'm hoping is that people will come away from it and go, oh yeah, this is actually really cool. I've seen some areas of mycology that I hadn't thought about, and I think I could either apply that to something else I'm doing, or hopefully there'll be some new businesses start up out of it, and people see the opportunities out there within the mycology industry. I think that is a big thing at the moment. Is obviously the mushroom space is an exploding industry. There's all sorts of all sorts of opportunities that are arising, and people are trying to figure out where they fit into that. And we were talking about how do people find that passion? If your passion is already mushrooms and you're trying to find where you fit in the wider picture, I think really that that's what the community mycology space is going to be for. That, and it's there's also, we're trying to sort of bring together in a more physical environment, and I think this kind of plays into what you guys are doing as well. Is we want to bring people together to see how we can support each other, and and where we fit into each other's lives as well. It's at the moment that the mycology industry is not, it isn't really like a competitive space. We're all very much like, there's a mutualistic approach to everything, and I think that we'd like to continue to try and push that, even with sort of mushroom growers. I think when you obviously, food producers can support each other in various different ways, whether it's like shortfalls in crops, and another local producer can help them with that. So I think there's a good opportunity there for bringing everyone together, and just seeing where we fit into each other's lives, as well as just into the wider picture.
That makes a lot of sense. We've had Max and Nikki on the podcast as well previously. For someone who's listening and wants to know more about All Things Fungi and how those two got started with that, and we'll obviously be there as well. But I think that when it comes to the mushroom industry, I certainly get that sense of it's very easy to connect with people, and Max and Nikki, certainly, speaking of those two, have connected us with some amazing people in the space, including yourself. And there is certainly a sense of, I wouldn't say gold rush, but I think it feels like it's very early days, and if you have energy and passion, you can really create a space for yourself. So I think it's, generally, as a direction for someone who is wanting to leave a stale career behind or wants to look for something new, it's a good place to look. And not everyone's going to be a mushroom enthusiast, but I think it's worth taking a look. And at an event like that, that can be transformational, that you could have an experience, or you could meet people that could then alter the trajectory of your life into a more fungal direction, let's just say.
Yeah.
And I think it's great to provide those spaces, and I'm sure it's integral to the growth of the movement to have those kinds of events. So really appreciate you putting your support behind that.
That's-
And as an overall, I mean, when it comes to the your journey that you've been on, you've achieved a definition of, you've had a definition of success, which is I'll have my successful exit from my tech startup, and you did that, and that's really the dream for so many people to this day. And you've then gone on to this quest and built Mycopunks up to what it is now. So has that changed the way that you define success in your own life?
Yeah, I mean, I think working in a job where that where I care so much, it's the first time I've had that feeling. I think, I talked before about finding the technical aspects of a job, and the day-to-day of it being an interesting thing. And I definitely think that was what sustained me for so long um, in the tech industry, was that I found programming and right up to sort of being a CTO, that was challenging enough to keep my brain entertained in a way that, that I could sustain it. And I think that, like, when I look at my overall history of working in the tech industry, it's not always been, it's not always been great. I've been sacked from a few jobs. I've been made redundant multiple times. It's there are times when I've not been in an environment that's made me feel um that hasn't felt sustainable, and I've almost like switched off. My brain has just gone, no, this is not happening for you. So I think really, my measure of success now would be being able to run the business. Being able to run a business in on your own terms an incredibly, like, privileged thing. Um, being being able to do things in a way that allows a level of ethics that you find important is also also a really great thing. I think, this from if you're looking to work for another business, it's like you have to try and find businesses that, are more aligned with how you feel personally. I think it helps you feel more ethically taken care of, in terms of, like, your own values. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's Yeah, I think I'm very lucky. Is the it could I could very just as easily not have felt as passionate about this industry as any other, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
for me, I think I'm just happy to be around people that feel like my people, um, and that, I think, is something that is possible for people if you put yourself in the right communities, and you put yourself out there to the right level. Hopefully, this is why, like going back to the festival, this is why opportunities like that are so important, because you will meet people there who you'll gel with, and there are opportunities out there. People will tell you about different opportunities within the industry, and even outside of the industry. If this doesn't end up being a job, I think, it's worth remembering that things that you love doing don't always have to be your job, and sometimes they shouldn't be. I think if you love mushrooms, you shouldn't always be thinking, how can I make this my job? Because it could kill it for you.
Good. But Chris, what I think is so interesting about your journey, and just piecing it together from what you've shared here, you're in a position where the money was taken care of, and then you thought, okay, what gives me meaning? What is fun to me? What is it that I want to engage with? And I think that's such an important place to come from, which has then shaped Mycopunks into what it is now, that you've really focused on um, something that you care about, and then also connecting with people that are in that space. And I think that's such an important theme for people going through that same process, is if you can just free yourself from whether you're in that position, or whether you just like try to not focus on that. You didn't, I think Mycopunks would be completely different if, for example, you'd said, okay, I need to, I want to make £5 million in the next 3 years. And, oh, this is a new industry I could get into. And you approach it from that angle.
Yeah,
Um, but you did it from a completely opposite angle of like, this is super interesting. This is amazing. And I want to share this with more people. And,
yeah,
and I want to meet the people that are involved here. And I think, that in itself is such a good example of how I can navigate this process of disillusionment, or burnout, or
yeah,
I've achieved the success that uh, everyone told me to go after, but I now feel empty inside. So how do I go from there? Do you have anything to add to that, or what are your comments on that?
oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. Um, Again, I just think, it comes down to, I do agree with you. I think that Mycopunks could have been a very different business. I think if we would have been looking at this from a purely profit driven standpoint, we certainly wouldn't be doing a lot of the things that we're doing. The a lot of the things that we do actually, I sometimes take internal like jabs from the team about about it being like more of a hobby thing for me. There are certain things, aspects to our business where, they're not beneficial to our business at all, but they're like the things that I love about the mushroom industry and and the mushroom space in general. Um, and I think that sometimes I do need to like be more almost like I need to have people push me back onto the business rails of things, because I go into these different avenues of mycology and I'm like, that's super interesting. We've got to like, how can I be doing this thing as well? But I think, if you look at some of the products that we stock, compared to other people who are in our industry, especially things around like books and things like that, like there are a lot of things that there's just like there's no profit in, but ever since Amazon became a book, the biggest bookseller in the world, there's no profit in books. And but books are such an important part of mycology, and there's such a, there are certain things that we sell that I think indicate the sort of business and the sort of the sort of where we are in the industry. Um, some of the things just are not good sellers, but they're things that I think are fundamentally important to like to mycology itself. They're not necessarily good business decisions. So yeah, I think yeah, I think that's where we're at. I think, and I'll continue to do that. I'm not like afraid to to do. I'm not afraid to kind of do things um that are not in the interest of the business, but are more just like actually just interesting in general, because I think it keeps things interesting for me personally. And also there's always the chance that like we'll see opportunities where we can actually, make the business better and things like that. So um but yeah, for me it's just got to be fun. It's like
Yeah.
is the biggest thing, It has to be fun, and I have to enjoy the work I'm doing. Otherwise, I have this like internalized terror that I'll wake up one morning and I just won't love this anymore. And it's something that I've done before with
Yeah. And
industry. So I always have that fear. And it hasn't happened yet. So
okay, good, good.
that sounds like a negative end to the game. Just I always had the fear. I love this industry. I love mushroom people. I love going into work, and I'm super privileged, and I've got a beautiful community around me that are absolutely mental. Um, and I like talking to people about mushrooms. Nothing else.
Awesome. Um, and so with the industry having evolved quickly, I'm curious about what's changed since you started Mycopunks, and where do you see things moving? I mean, you've gone from initially wanting to have a mushroom farm to then being a mushroom grow supplier. And do you see yourself staying in that space, or do you see yourself moving elsewhere, or where do you see the industry overall moving as it matures?
And I think that as a business, we'll always look at like, opportunities that present themselves. But I've always been quite strict about not overlapping with any of our customers. Um, there's certainly opportunities out there for I think a business of our size and with our type of infrastructure now, I think we actually have the ability to do a lot. We have the staff, we have the machinery to move into a lot of other areas that would, I feel, would conflict with our business. Um, but yeah, I think we're interested at the moment. We're sort of looking heavily into DNA sequencing, so that's another area of business that we're looking at. Um, but yeah, I try not to stray out of our lane too much, because I feel like what we do has to have there's like a singular thing that I keep in my mind, which is our product should teach people about mycology, or they should facilitate some level of learning about mycology. So I don't tend to like stock any products that just do everything for you as well. So we wouldn't stock pre-colonized grow kits, or anything like that. Even though we have the facilities to make probably more than any other person in the UK, we have the grain, the substrates all here.
Mm.
It's we try and stay in our lane to some extent, because I feel like you can distribute yourself too thinly, and I don't like the idea of taking away business from our customers as well. You know, growing food for small cultivators is already it's a very thankless task. It's hard, you know, it's hard graft, and you know, a good area of their business is grow kits. So I would never be doing anything that like would affect their businesses. And in fact, it's a good, I think it's a good place to, you know, to work out where you fit within, you know, within the industry, and actually say this is some niche that I'm gonna really focus on. I actually think that, like, you know, sometimes I have this like I've had this conversation with a few people. It's like, if I was going to be like a competitor to us right now, I'd look at just one area of our business and I'd go, I'm just going to do that one thing. Because we kind of like, we've expanded a little bit into, you know, into sort of a wider mycology supply business.
Mm.
But actually, there's something I often get jealous when I see businesses that are just doing like grain and substrate, because it's such a simple margin business that
Mm.
if you're like one or two people, it's such a great business. And we have now we have like a huge product range, like 200 products, and we have to manage all the ordering for all this stuff, and it's just like, oh god, I've like created this monster. But you know, we're making it work. We're making it work, and it's fun. So.
Sounds like it. So before we wrap up the podcast, is there anything else that you'd want to share with our listeners about Mycopunks, All Things Fungi, or something beyond that I haven't covered?
Mostly that, like, you know, if you're looking to get into the mushroom industry, and you want to have a chat, I'm on Instagram as well. So like, I try and sort of buy a bit of time each month to speak to people who are interested in getting into businesses that have like a solid plan. You know, I won't generally have calls with people, you know, unless they have like you know, they actually have a really solid idea of what they want to do. Otherwise, I could just talk for hours with people who don't really have much of an intention. But yeah, I'm available if people, you know, have an idea that they need support with, or they want to flesh out some ideas, um, or if you just want to talk about mushrooms. I'm on Instagram. I'm pretty responsive. So
Great. So that's just for listeners to remind them, for All Things Fungi, that's the 12th or the 14th of September.
Mhm.
And the Mycelium Hub will be there. We'll do a workshop and also introduce the membership that we'll be launching. And we'll talk to you about that. And because we're also looking for partners for that. So let's see what emerges there.
Yeah, sounds good.
Look, Chris, thank you for sharing your journey with us. And you know, it's from disillusionment or burnout, whatever you want to call it, to building Mycopunks. Your story shows how purpose and community can emerge or grow from even the toughest places, that you're in a spot of where to from here. And for the listeners, if you're curious to start your own mycelial journey, check out the links in the show notes. And until next time, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep thinking like the mycelium.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Bye.